Hey, what's up, Path to Freedom listeners? And thank you so much for dropping in for another episode. This is episode 112, and my guest is Jeremy Miller, who's the founder of Jeremy Miller Fitness. One of the things I told you at the beginning of this year was that personally, I'm very focused on mindset development, and I have been for a while, but I really set some goals for myself this year around intentionally strengthening and improving my mindset. And I also told you that I wanted to have more guests on the podcast that could really share, their own personal tactics and strategies that they use in their day-to-day life to improve their mindset. And Jeremy Miller is a perfect example of this. Not only is Jeremy a successful entrepreneur and, shares some of that experience with us, how, he got the confidence to walk away from a very good, corporate job with a salary and benefits and everything that comes with that to go all in on his fitness business. But he's also a competitive runner. He runs marathons and ultra marathons. In fact, that's predominantly what he does in his fitness business. He does one-on-one coaching. He has an app that coaches people that, want to become better runners, whether that's competitive or they just want to get better at running, regardless of what their experience with running is at that point. So Jeremy kind of brings, I think, several different perspectives that are really going to add some value for those listening. One is, this perspective of what it takes to, go all in as an entrepreneur. And also this other perspective of just the type of mindset that's needed to do very hard things, such as running a marathon or running an ultra marathon. And, we talk a lot about the alignment in terms of the mindset that's necessary to be an entrepreneur and the mindset that's necessary to go out and run a marathon. And Jeremy shares some tips and strategies that he uses to, flip that switch mentally when, he knows he needs to go out and get some miles in, but it's the last thing that he feels like doing. So without stealing too much thunder from Jeremy of the episode, let's go ahead and get into it. But I thoroughly enjoyed getting to know Jeremy a little bit and talking to him in this episode. I have no doubt that you'll enjoy every second of it. He shares a lot of valuable information and experience. So without further ado, let's drop in with Jeremy Miller. Jeremy, welcome. Thanks for being here, man.
Wes, what's going on, man? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, happy to do it. So for those that are not familiar with, you've got a pretty big following on social media. But for those that may not be familiar with you, just, give us kind of a brief introduction and, what you do in your business.
Yeah, so I would say I want to start with the large following is definitely a newer thing. Since over the last 6 months, basically built that up. But
really, okay.
Now I'm a running coach, content creator. I'm a runner myself, marathons, ultra marathons, and just doing a whole bunch of things. But running is kind of that central idea behind all of it.
Yeah. So we were chatting a little bit about this, but you've been able to build a full-time business that's your full-time, working focus centered around, this kind of love or passion that you have for running. So tell us a little bit more, what do you actually do in your business? How have you been able to essentially monetize something that was already such a big part of your life?
Yeah. So about 8 months ago or so, I had a couple of friends hit me up, say hey, I know you're a runner, you've done some marathons, done some trail running and ultra marathons, and I want to run a marathon myself. So do you think you could help me, build a training plan? And I think, just like any other great business that kind of starts out with having friends and family, ask you for favors like that. And so started out that way, helping just a couple of friends, coaching them for their marathons. It went really well. And I was still working a 9-to-5 job at that time. And I was like, man, I think this coaching thing could go somewhere. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. It's very fulfilling. And so I built a website out, started marketing myself just a little bit on Instagram and social media, saying hey guys, I'm going to start coaching people for running and, talk about my experience and the knowledge that I can provide you. And then from there, it just kind of honestly overnight kind of exploded. I went from those couple of friends to 30 or 40 people within a couple of weeks.
Wow.
So it blew up really quickly, which is nice. So that's kind of like the
Sure.
main source of income now. And then now I'm up to like 60 people that I'm working with one-on-one, still growing that every month. And then recently I built out a training app where I wanted to be able to give value to more people without obviously having to trade my time for it. So
Sure.
created this training app where it's like all these different videos of me doing exercises, built out several different training programs, mostly related to like strength training, but also running as well, combining the two.
Okay.
And so I've got several hundred people on there using those programs. And again, that's a nice thing because they're still getting my knowledge and my insights without like that direct one-on-one contact with me.
Yep.
And then I'm also doing some like brand partnerships online now that I've built a little bit of an audience, and then as well as doing some more recently like content consulting and teaching other people what I've learned through the process of building up my personal brand.
That's so cool, man. There's so many things that I want to ask you about just in that kind of brief overview, but I guess one of the first ones would be because you said the following that you've developed is really, kind of been within the last 6 months. Like, can you look back and point to any kind of one thing that really, kind of made that hockey stick growth curve with your following?
I think, yeah, it's pretty simple, honestly. And it's just, I started posting every single day on my Instagram, my TikTok, my YouTube. I had like a little following, like I think I had like 3,000 or 4,000 Instagram followers, and most of it was just friends from high school and
Sure.
college and stuff. And then I just kind of made the decision. I'm like, I would love to be able to build a following and have an audience to whatever I end up wanting to do in my life. Like it's so valuable to have that following. So I was like, okay, but I guess to give a little bit more background, my job that I was doing, the 9 to 5 job, was building this guy's personal brand. His name's Nick Bear. He's a CEO of a supplement company here in Austin.
Okay.
And he's got a really large following. He's got like 1 million YouTube subscribers, but I was helping him build his content out.
Okay.
So I learned all these tips and tricks and really kind of developed this formula of, how to create valuable content for people and do it in a consistent way. And
Right.
so I was like, really reached that point of like, okay, I can do this for myself. I know how to do it. So, kind of just made that leap of, going all in on myself. And I think it was like July 20th, somewhere around there. I just said, okay, I'm going to post every single day, whether it's a photo, a reel, whatever it is, onto my Instagram feed. And for the last 6-7 months, it's been every single day. Haven't missed a day since then. And again, at that time, I had about 3,000 or 4,000 Instagram followers. Now it's like 67,000.
Yeah.
And continuing to grow every single day. So to answer your question, that one thing was just that decision to be consistent with it.
I was kind of hoping that was going to be the answer, right? Because I think a lot of people, they look at, call it an influencer, content creator, whatever, and they're like, oh, there's some like, silver bullet, right? And some people like, do blow up literally almost overnight. But I think, from everything I've seen, the real key is just making that decision to be consistent with it, which, is the case in virtually every other aspect of life, right? Is if you want to get results, you got to be consistent and put in the work. So but it's cool that you had that experience, you were kind of learning this formula and then just got to a point and you're like, hey, I'm doing this for someone else. Like, why not do it for myself?
That's 100% spot on. And it was just like, I'm putting in so much time and energy and into building this big thing for someone else. Like, and again, I wanted to always treat it as a learning experience, but which I I got that out of it. But it just reached that point where I'm like, I could be doing this for myself, having higher returns, building something for me rather than, building something for somebody else. And it was, it's definitely a tough decision to leave that, the security of a job. And I know that's, one of the biggest things for everybody. But at the end of the day, it's like, I think you're just going to kind of figure it out. It's a terrible answer, but if you just put yourself into that very uncomfortable situation, I think, either way, like you're going to figure it out. It's like sink or swim, basically.
Yeah, it is. It's like, action always trumps fear, right? I think a lot of people, whether it's starting a business or, I'm sure we'll talk more about running, in this conversation, right? But like if someone wanted to start training, to run a 5K or a half marathon or something, but they're not really a runner, it's like, there's this temptation to like wait until you feel like you're better prepared or fully prepared. And it's like, you're never going to be unless you start taking some action. And once you start taking action, like, yeah, it's going to feel uncomfortable and you're not going to have it all figured out. But that's when the pieces start to kind of fall in place and you start to get some clarity on, what you need to do from there. And it's like just one step builds on the other. So I think that's really good advice. Was it something that would you say you really struggled with that decision to leave the security of a good job and start your own thing, or did that come a little more naturally to you?
Yes and no. I will say before I had that 9 to 5 job, I was self-employed for a couple of years before that, just doing like photo and video freelance kind of stuff, and that ultimately led me to that job. So I had like some experience. When I was doing the freelance, I wasn't making a lot of money, and it was like still very insecure. So I was like, okay, I think I can figure out how to do it. But even prior to that, I think going from self-employed to a 9 to 5 job, it becomes very, very comfortable because it's like you just have a salary, you get a paycheck every 2 weeks. It's like it's very low risk.
Yeah.
And so like even though I already had that prior experience of being self-employed, I like easily fell into that same like routine of the 9 to 5 thing.
Yeah.
And so again, it came to the point of like, okay, I know how to do it, but it's still going to be scary. And just like you mentioned, it's like, if you don't just take that first step and do it, like it's never going to happen. Like you have to do it. It's just, I think so many people, and myself included, suffer from the paralysis by analysis of like, you're just going to think of all the reasons you shouldn't do it and all the reasons that it could go wrong and all these things. But unless you actually take action on it, like you never actually know, like, I don't know. It's, like you said, action trumps fear 100% of the time. So, and I treat like the athletes that I coach for running, I tell them that same exact thing. Like if they want to qualify for like the Boston Marathon, it's like a big time. It's a scary goal to set. But I tell them, I'm like, you might not be there right now, but you're never going to get there if you don't at least try. And that's it applies to several things like that.
Yeah, it really does. And I think like a lot of times, if you have some of these goals, right, some of, especially before you're taking any action, when you're kind of trapped in the paralysis by analysis mode, it's like, these goals can look and feel unattainable. And like, I mean, I can point to numerous instances in my life and career where like, I can remember being at one point and being like, man, if I could just get there, that would be awesome. And now I look at it, I'm like, well, I'm way past there now. And I never, and like for me, not even that long ago, like 5-6 years ago, you've blown some of those goals out of the water because it's like this, compounding interest, right? If you're taking action and putting in the work, like, it's going to be messy at times. You're definitely going to make some mistakes and still going to be uncomfortable, but it pays off over time. And it really does kind of compound or snowball.
Yeah. I think one of the things that scared me at least was I had, these things that I wanted to go do, these goals that I had, but I would look at people that were doing those things and I would forget like, oh, they've been doing it for years. They've been doing it for like a decade. And then it just kills your confidence because you're like, man, I'll never be able to get there. Like, how am I going to take all these steps to get there? But it's like everybody has to start somewhere. And that person that you're looking up to started probably a similar position that you're in right now. And so you just have to take it literally one day at a time, like do, one thing each day to keep moving the needle. And I think for me, at least, that's like an easier way mentally to kind of chunk it up and to break it down and not feel overwhelmed and to keep that confidence is just, it's like be better than you were yesterday or just, do a little bit more than you did the day before.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Everyone started somewhere because it is, especially in this day and age with social media and stuff. And basically everywhere you look, it's someone's highlight reel, right? They're putting out what they want you to see, none of the other stuff. And so it's very easy to fall into that. Well, they've got it all figured out. They're perfect. But then yourself and you're like, well, I'm not perfect. Like, So yeah, I think that's a really, really important thing that people need to keep in mind. And I was telling you this before we started recording. I thought it was really interesting. Part of your story, now you've got this business that's centered around, training people to run and be high performing athletes. But you haven't been a runner your whole life. So tell us a little bit about, like, how did your journey, if you will, with running start? Because I think you're a perfect example of someone else that's out there thinking, hey, I can never run an ultra marathon. Like, you haven't been doing this for your whole life.
100%. So I played sports growing up. Hockey was my main thing. So I've always been active, and generally when we would have to run in sports, it was for punishment. So I just hated running. I absolutely resented it.
Yep.
And it was literally just like the worst thing ever. And then it was 2018. I picked up David Goggins' book. I heard him on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I feel like a lot of people have this similar story of hearing David Goggins and getting into running. But I mean, there's something about it. It's just listening to his story, listening to him speak, and like just his perspective resonated so much with me. Of like, he had a horrible childhood. I don't know how much you know about him, but his dad was like super abusive mentally, psychologically, and like. My home life wasn't really that bad, but like my parents divorced when I was in high school, and like it got pretty nasty and stuff. So like I just related a lot to that kind of stuff. Hearing him talk about running being like not necessarily like an escape, but like a means to become tougher mentally and be able to handle the things that life throws at you, and kind of, basically putting yourself in like an uncomfortable situation every single day by doing something like running or weightlifting, or, going and do these like big, very challenging physical events. And I always like to think of it now as like, it's like voluntary suffering on a daily basis. It's like, if you wake up in the morning, it's uncomfortable. Like, you don't want to get out of bed. Nobody does, but get up, go out inside in the cold and go run for 45 minutes or an hour. Like, that's typically the hardest part of your day. And if you can go out and get that done first thing in the morning, like the rest of your day is going to be cake. And so I started to learn that, from listening to his podcast, reading his book, and then experiencing it myself. And I literally, for the first whole year of me getting into running, I ran no more than like 2 miles a day. It was just like, go run out a mile, come back a mile. And that was my run for the day. It took me like 20 minutes. And now it's like, yesterday I ran 10 miles on a Wednesday and like, didn't even think about it. So it's just so crazy. The compounding effect of that consistency of showing up and continuing to work at something. But yes, that's, I mean, a basic overview of the stories, started listening to him and really just got addicted to like, okay, today I'm going to run 2 miles. Next week I'll run 3 miles and so on. And just kind of go down that path of doing more distance and running faster. And it can really kind of turn into like a drug almost, especially like when it comes to these different races. Like, did my first 5K, and then I'd signed up for a half marathon. And I'm like, man, I wonder if I could do a full marathon. After I did the full marathon, I was like, what if I did like a 50 miler? And it's, now there's like 250 mile races and even more than that. So it's just crazy where it goes from there.
Have you read his newest book? I just finished it a couple of weeks ago. And I mean, some of the races that he's done, I mean, hundreds of miles long, and, doing it with injuries and whatnot. But no, it's so true. Like, if you're willing to really intentionally work on, becoming tougher mentally, right? So, doing hard things on purpose, it has such an impact on your life in every aspect of your life. But it makes it almost anything else you're going to do easier, right? And I run a bit, but I wouldn't consider myself a runner. Also played sports growing up. It was always punishment. So I've never like enjoyed running, but I got into doing cold showers a few years ago and would do it first thing in the morning. And like, there's obviously physical benefits to doing that. But for me, the biggest benefit is the mental toughness, right? If you can get in the shower and crank that nozzle cold first thing in the morning, even though your mind and body's screaming at you not to, like, you're probably not going to have much else come up the rest of the day that's going to be harder than that, So it's just kind of setting the tone for yourself and for the day. And those are just, kind of simple examples. But, if you get into a habit of doing these types of things intentionally, right? Because I think one of the biggest things we struggle with, in this day and age is like everything's so easy, everything's on demand. We can pretty much constantly have like these, short-term dopamine hits coming at us. And I think long-term, that's like a recipe for depression or just, not really living a fulfilled life. And so I think people need to find ways. It can look different for each person, right? It doesn't have to be running, it doesn't have to be cold plunges or whatever, but find ways to work on your mindset every day. Just like, if you want to be healthy and have a good body, you gotta put the work in physically.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I think another way I like to look at it is just getting, a small win in the morning, to start every single day, because like, the same thing as trying to leave a 9 to 5 job and go and work for yourself. It's like a lot of times I lack the confidence of like, can I run this business? Can I do this big goal that I have? And so, waking up first thing in the morning and just doing something that is uncomfortable for you. And again, it doesn't have to be running or physical exercise, whatever it is, like just whatever is uncomfortable for you that is going to challenge you and get you out of your comfort zone. Go and do that thing. And then it's like, okay, you start your day off with a win. And then, when you're driving in traffic and somebody cuts you off, like you're not raging at them because, you got that out. And like, you're like, I don't care. Like there's so many other things I'd rather think about and worry
move
about.
on.
Right. Exactly. So, I think, just getting those wins in the morning and it builds so much confidence to allow you to take those big jumps and go and do those things that you really want to do that are scary because again, you've built that confidence.
Yeah. So, talking of like David Goggins and stuff, I wasn't planning to ask you this, but I happened to notice, I'm sure you're a big fan of Cameron Haynes, with you being a runner and whatnot. And he talks about a lot of the mindset stuff. He follows you on Instagram. I assume you know that, right?
Yeah. I met him when I was running my marathon up in Eugene, Oregon. He lives in Eugene.
Yeah.
And I like in the back of my mind, I was like, oh man, it'd be cool to run into Cam Haynes while I'm out here. I didn't expect to. And then it was like mile 6 of the marathon. I see this like little buff dude run up next to me. And then I didn't think much of it again. And then I look at his shirt and he's got like the Keep Hammering logo on the back of his shirt.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap. I think that's Cam Haynes. So I ran up next to him and like ran with him for a couple of miles and chatted with him. And then I actually talked him into coming down to Austin to do the podcast for the guy that I was working for, Nick.
No way.
So he came down to Austin, did his podcast, and like we hung out a little bit. Super cool dude. I would say out of all of the like quote unquote famous people I've met, he is by far the most humble, like most genuine people that I've ever met. He's like, however he appears on Instagram and social media, like he's exactly that same way online.
I was gonna say, because that's how he comes across, right? Is just being a real dude and humble. But like if you know his story, he didn't really come from much, and he was a pretty what most people would consider ordinary guy. Until he started getting some traction and people started following him. But anyways, that's really cool. That's a really cool story. But I happened to notice that and I was like, that's really neat. Because I have a lot of respect for him. I like what he talks about and just kind of what he preaches, and he seems to really practice what he preaches too. So So, with your business, what types of people are you helping? Or is it like all competitive runners that are looking to, just keep getting better and gain an edge? Or are you working with people that, really don't have any experience running, but they want to get into it?
I would say it's about 70-30, honestly, about 70% of the people being either first-time marathoners or people that I wouldn't consider elite necessarily. And people that are, just trying to, again, run their first marathon, their first half marathon, or, they've done maybe 1 or 2 marathons and they just want to get faster. And then the other 30% would be, people that are more, I would guess, elite or people that have done several races, or that are, faster, I guess. And I hate even talking about paces and stuff because the way I look at it, everybody is putting in the same amount of effort, the same amount of work. There's several factors that go into how fast you are as a runner. It's, genetic, and there's a million things we could talk about. But again, it's like about 70% of the people are just, I would consider them newbie runners who are just looking for that help to go and do that first marathon. So that's honestly, those are the most gratifying people to work with, because, they've run maybe, 5K, or, they've never done anything over like 10 miles or something, and they want to go and run their first marathon, which is a huge accomplishment.
Sure.
So it's really cool to be a part of that process in someone's life.
If you're listening to this podcast, then there's a good chance that you're looking to create more freedom in your own life. There's also a good chance that you realize that owning your own business can be a great way to take more control of your livelihood and create more of that freedom that we're all looking for. Also, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you realize that I specialize in franchise ownership. In addition to owning franchise businesses myself, I have a franchise consulting firm, Path to Freedom, where I help people navigate what is typically an overwhelming process of understanding franchising, identifying specific franchise companies that could be a fit, and then conducting the due diligence in a thorough and efficient manner with those franchise brands. My whole purpose here is to leverage my experience working for franchisors, owning franchises myself, and how we've been able to use that to create more freedom in our lives and help you determine if that could be a path that makes sense for you as well. So if any of this sounds interesting, if you've considered business ownership in the past, whether you've explored franchising specifically or not, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to learn more about you and what it is that you're working towards in your life and determine if I may be in a position to help. A great starting point is the link below in the show notes, which will take you to a short form to fill out, and you'll receive a free copy of an ebook that I've put together, The 7 Steps to Freedom Through Franchise Ownership. That'll also get us connected, and I'd love to set up an introductory call where I can explain a little bit more about the process that I use to help people determine if franchise ownership could be a great way to start charting their own path to freedom. So click the link below in the show notes, receive the ebook, and let's get connected. I'd love to hear from you. Oh, I bet. So what would be, not to give away like, everything, but what would be kind of like the general protocol that you would help a newer runner start working on? Like, say their goal was to get to a point where they can run their first marathon, and say there's someone that's, never run more than a mile or two at a time when they start with you. Like, where do you start, and what does the progression kind of look like for them to be able to get to the point of being able to run a marathon?
Yeah, it's obviously it's different for everybody, because everybody has different background, different, baseline abilities. But for most people, it'll start out very, very slow, like even sometimes like a running walk or a run/walk type workout, where it's like, they'll run for 4 to 5 minutes and then walk for 2 to 3 minutes or something like that, just to like really get their body used to it. And that's, kind of the overarching theme with people running their first marathon, is just not getting too excited and like just trying to go out and run 10, 15 miles every single weekend. It's like you really have to ease into it, because if you never ran before, your body's not used to it.
Yeah.
And a lot of those muscles that you're using and the bones and stuff don't really get used anywhere else other than running. And so it's just so easy to cause an injury. And when I first started running, I had several injuries. And so I've kind of figured out ways to navigate those with newer people and, hopefully help them avoid those injuries. But again, kind of that main thing is just to not increase mileage too quickly and just to really ease into it. And obviously that takes a little bit more time. It might take 5 to 6 months to go from literally like couch to marathon, but that's the smartest way. And obviously, the best way to go about it without preventing or without causing a long-term injury.
Or just burning out, I would imagine, right? Like, even if you didn't seriously hurt yourself, like I said, I'm not a runner. I'm pretty active. I train, regularly or whatever, but running's not something I enjoy. And it sounds like I probably should give it a shot, because I see the benefit of, like we talked about, the mental toughness and all of that. But anyways, like if I went out and tried to run 6 or 7 miles right now, like I probably could force my way through it, but I'd be in a lot of pain. But I would also just be like, that, like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, that was absolutely miserable. Like, it would probably take away any desire whatsoever to like go back out the next day and get after it. Whereas like, if you start with these smaller kind of bite-sized chunks, it's easier to build consistency, which is going to improve your endurance. It's going to, these parts of your body that you're really not using unless you're running, those are going to get stronger. Just like you're talking about with building your social media following, right? It's consistency is a big part of it if you want to get the long-term results.
Yeah, I think running or anything that's very challenging, like a cold shower is a perfect example, is it's just like constant decision making. And I actually heard, to bring up again, David Goggins talking about this, of like, he calls it the 1 second decision of like literally every single second that you're enduring something that's uncomfortable, you're just constantly, should I keep going or should I stop? Should I keep going? Should I stop? Should I keep going? And it's so easy for that 1 second to be like, all right, I guess I'll stop. And then you call it quits right there. So I think obviously running is a physical endeavor, but it can become very, very mentally exhausting for that reason of like, you have to constantly be in that decision-making mode because it is so uncomfortable. And again, that's where you can kind of build up, that like callus to it of like, it just like anything else, like you do a bunch of pull-ups, like you're going to build calluses on your hands. You can do the same thing with your mind. And David Goggins talks about that a lot. And so it's the same thing with running. Like, I've talked about, I started with, 2 days or 2 miles a day, 3 miles a day, and slowly worked my way up. And so now it's like, to go run 3 or 4 miles, it's like, I don't even have to think about it. And now it's like to the point where like 20 miles is a big effort and I have to, kind of get myself into that mode. But, you can't get there without first going through all the other steps.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, because, I'm sure that, the vast majority of the time you love running. I'm sure in some ways it's kind of therapeutic for you. But I also imagine there's days where it's the last thing you feel like doing, right? You're running a business now, that business is growing, like you're probably getting pulled in a lot of different directions. And I'm sure there's days where you're like, look, I need it. I know I need to go get my miles in, but I don't have the time, or I don't feel like it, or the weather's crappy, or whatever it is. Like, what are some of the, I guess, mental hacks or tricks that you've developed to maybe kind of flip that switch in your head to go from, I don't feel like doing this, but I know I need to all right, let's go get it done?
I would say 5 out of the 6 days a week that I run, I don't want to run. So,
all right, that's good to hear for those of us that really don't like to run.
Yeah, I really don't want to most of the time. But I would say, to answer your question, I basically just tell myself, like, think about how it's going to feel when you finish. And really the hardest part is just getting out the door, because it's like, once I'm out the door, then I'm good. But it's like, actually putting on my running clothes, putting on my shoes, and, going out the door, that is by far the hardest hardest part of the process. Because again, it's like, once you're out there, then you're fine. You're already out there, so you might as well just do it.
Yeah.
And I tell myself that too, like when it comes to like strength training, or when it comes to like creating a video, or like, writing a post or something. It's always like the hardest part is opening up your laptop and like opening up a Word document.
Yeah,
like
starting.
Once you get that first word on the page, like you're good. But it's just that initial part that's where the most friction is at. And so that's what I tell myself, so kind of subconsciously now, is like, just get out the door and figure it out at that point. But I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. It answers the question really well, I think. And like, I can relate to that. I've learned, in different things, to think about like how I'm going to feel once it's done. Because that's reminding yourself, like, I need to do this. I'm better off if I do it. I've tried to, like, because like one of the things I've struggled with is getting up early and working out, before the day starts. Like, I would much rather work out mid-afternoon or in the evening. And, a lot of times that's feasible, but then there's times where that just doesn't jive with, my schedule or the kids' schedule or whatever. And so, like, when I do get up early and work out, and then I've got like maybe an hour after working out before the kids get up, before my phone starts going off and emails start flying, like, that's a really nice time too. That's kind of like a really nice reward. And so I've almost gotten where I take like a mental snapshot every time I find myself like sitting down with a cup of coffee, it's quiet, and I've got like an hour to myself. I'm like, this is why I need to get up, and like, yeah, the workout and all that is important, but like, this is sweet. Like, this is a really nice reward. It's not perfect. There's still plenty of mornings when the alarm goes off and I'm like, nope, not feeling like doing that. And, but if you can bring that kind of memory top of mind, then for me, at least, it's helped. So that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned strength training and, some of the stuff that I've seen you put on Instagram, it seems like that's a pretty big part of your overall training protocol. So, how important do you say, strength training is for someone that wants to be a competitive runner? Because like you're pretty good shape. You're pretty jacked, right? I think a lot of people think of runners like little scrawny dudes that, they just run, but they don't have any muscle on them. So like, how important is it if you want to really be serious about running to also have a good strength training program?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about that, like where, they seem like mutually exclusive things. And in my experience, and, science says that they shouldn't be, and they don't have to be. And so like for my first marathon example, I didn't strength train whatsoever. I just focused solely on running because I thought that was the thing to do. And so I stopped lifting all this stuff, and I just felt like crap all the time. I didn't hit my goal. I finished the marathon, but again, I didn't do what I wanted to do. And then my second marathon, I started adding in more strength training. It was only like 2 to 3 days a week, nothing like real crazy. But I felt better all the time, just on a day-to-day basis. I like my splits were getting faster, my paces were getting faster, and I ended up crushing my goal time. And so since then, that was about a year ago. Now on a weekly basis, I lift 4 to 6 times a week, and I just feel so much better. And I think there's so many benefits to it outside of just like performance, but injury prevention is one of the biggest things. And there's a lot of like hormonal benefits as well, because strictly endurance training is just not really great for your hormones. So you need that strength training to kind of balance it out with the endurance. So there's a lot of science behind it as well, but I think like for me, I lifted in high school, lifted in college, and that's exactly what I did. I just went in and like went to the gym and lifted and worked out. I didn't really like have intention with it. But now making running a focus, and now like strength training, I feel like I'm training and having more intention with it. And there's just so many benefits to it. It's like literally on a weekly basis, I can see myself getting stronger in the gym and stronger as a runner. So I think it's super crucial.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it's got to be cool, because you're now like, lifting and strength training with this intention of becoming a better runner, being able to track that progress, right? Because like, I'm sure you can see the results and like how much you're able to lift and when you look in the mirror, but being able to see it like actually help you improve your metrics as a runner. I'm sure that makes it easier to keep, putting in that work intentionally.
Definitely. And I think really, I mean, obviously I love to be able to run faster and run farther and feel better while doing it. But honestly, it's just kind of a longevity thing. Like I know that, like I don't really do a lot of like bodybuilding type stuff. It's more functional movements, a lot of kettlebell kind of stuff. And so like, cross plane type movements that really require your full body. And like, I've never been like a super flexible, super mobile guy, but after doing this type of training, I just in my day-to-day life, like I feel better. I can bend down and pick something up, and like it just feels easier. I can like play with my dogs and like have a little bit more energy and like spring in my step. So there's so much to it outside of just running. Obviously like that's an added bonus as well, but there's and that's at the end of the day, that's why I run. I don't really run to just run fast and do all these races. I do it because I just want to like feel good in my day-to-day life and continue that longevity.
Yeah. It's important. I mean, I'm 36. I've got 3 kids, and it's like it starts to catch up with you, stuff that like just picking the kids up and throwing them around and playing with them, like it'll hurt your back, your knees. If you can consistently try to just improve your overall strength and endurance and all that, it's going to pay dividends long term, and you're just going to have a better quality life all around. What about nutrition? How big of a role does nutrition play in all of this?
Honestly, I think nutrition is more important than sleep, your exercise. Like all these other things, I think nutrition trumps all those things just because, it's literally the fuel that you're putting into your body and having your body operate off of. And there's just so many benefits. Obviously, like nutrition is the hardest part as well.
Yeah.
Because again, it's that constant decision making of like, well, should I just go to McDonald's or, should I buy this like highly processed thing that's cheaper and tastes better? Or should I, spend a little bit more time to cook and spend maybe a little bit more money or whatever it might be? But I mean, like when I grew up, my parents didn't teach me anything about nutrition. I ate like Wendy's and McDonald's 5 times a week, like ramen noodles, like just the worst diet ever. But unfortunately, that's like pretty common.
Yeah, it's very common.
And so when I got into college and, started buying my own groceries and started learning about this stuff, I, would buy whole foods, eating more of like a lot of like animal based kind of stuff, like meat, eggs, milk, all that stuff. And like, I felt so much better. I had more energy. I wasn't tired. I didn't have headaches. And so now I've been doing that for the last probably like 5 to 6 years. And I feel like now I have to keep doing that to keep with the lifestyle of like running and lifting every day and, running a business and all this stuff. Like having to do all that while feeling like crap is just, it's not going to work. So
yeah,
having that proper nutrition and fuel is key.
Man, it's a game changer. Like I wish I would have clued into some of this, earlier like you did, because for us, it was like when we started having kids, we started paying a little more attention to like what's in different foods. And like, it's crazy the marketing that some of these food companies can get away with, where they're, marketing it as organic or healthy or local. Like there's just so much stuff when you really actually get some level of understanding of like what's in these foods and whether they're good for you or not. It's like, holy crap, I can't believe they're allowed to put that on the box. But so anyways, for me, like everything you just said, like I've just started really getting serious about it for myself in the last 6 months or so. But the way it makes you feel in terms of energy levels, and once you kind of get used to eating clean, it doesn't take much for you to really feel the negative effects of eating garbage. Like one meal and you're going to be like, holy crap, I feel like complete crap. I want to go take a nap. Like I just have no energy, no motivation. So like, it doesn't take much to really remind you, why it's worth putting in the extra, time and money, effort, whatever to eat clean.
Yeah. I think my girlfriend and I, are kind of on the same page about this, which is nice. But same thing with drinking and alcohol. It's like when I was in college, like most other people, like we'd drink Friday, Saturday night, and your whole weekend is just like trying to recover from that.
Yep.
And after doing that for a couple of years, I'm like, what is the point of this? Like, it's fun to go out and socialize, but it just physically and mentally, it's just so terrible for your body and your mind. And so now, we'll have like, if we go out to dinner, we'll have a drink or something, but it's the same thing you mentioned of like, once you get used to not drinking and it doesn't become a part of your daily life. And then, you have that one drink at dinner, like 2 drinks, it's like, you feel it the next day and you're like, wow, I feel like absolute shit. And so it's like, man, I can't imagine how I was dealing with it when I was doing this every single weekend. And I know I have plenty of friends still like back home that do the same thing every Thursday, Friday night, just getting drunk and just, I don't know. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I, we love to have a drink, every now and then, but we used to go a lot harder. And, for us, it was, any of these changes we've made have been, we've been kind of slow to adopt some of it, kind of stubborn in some of it, like, because, a lot of our friends were always out partying and drinking and stuff. So it was like, that was what we did if we were going to, be out socializing. So again, for us, like, kids was a step in the right direction. Cause like, you think being hungover sucks, like try being hungover with, a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. They don't know or care that you're hungover. They're going to be loud. They're going to climb all over you. They're going to want you to play with them. Like that's the only thing worse than a really bad hangover is like a really bad hangover with your 2-year-old hanging out with you. So we just kind of naturally started doing less and less of it. And, but yeah, it's a game changer when, you can just kind of get to a point where that's not like such a big part of your life. And I think it all comes down to, prioritizing, right? Do you want to have the energy and the drive and the motivation to go out and really build the type of life that you want? Or do you want to take that, short quick win, right? That quick little dopamine hit. It's like, it's fun to get drunk with your friends, but you pay a price afterwards. And as you get older and you have more responsibilities and your body just doesn't, recover as quickly from that, there's a tax that you have to pay, if that's a big part of your lifestyle. So it's interesting. I could nerd out on this type of stuff all day with you, but so one of the other things I want to get from you is, like everything, there's been kind of some themes that have come up if we've been talking today, right? Just get started, start taking small steps. Consistency, kind of leads to this compounding effect. How much do you think that what you've learned from running, for the last 5 or 6 years, how much do you think that has and will continue to help you, as you really go all in on this entrepreneurial journey?
For me, it's been 100%, honestly. Like that's always kind of the driving factor behind why I want to run, is because it is such a tangible way to see progress, see yourself improving, and again, like making yourself putting yourself into these uncomfortable situations. And it's like when you can have that tangible thing that you can see and you can look at the data and be like, wow, this is where I was 2 years ago and this is where I am now. I think that's just one of the most powerful things, because you can take that and you can apply it to your business or your relationships or whatever it is that you're trying to grow or prioritize. And I don't know, that I think that's, again, just why running is such a powerful thing. Or it might be strength training, or it might be doing a 2-minute cold shower every day, whatever it might be. It's like just continuing to show up and do some sort of thing that where you can literally see the progress. That's really what keeps me going, is being able to do that and then know that it is, bleeding into all these other parts of my life as well.
Yeah. It's such good advice. And I think some of this is counterintuitive, right? Until you start to really see it in your own life, right? Because, kind of talking about what we were with like eating junk food and, drinking more than you should. Like, I think a lot of times like that sounds like the good life, right? It's like, hey, I can eat whatever I want. It tastes good. It's easy. I'm going out and having drinks with my friends. Like, that's fun. Like, who wouldn't want to do a lot of that? And on the flip side of that, you're like, well, if I'm intentionally doing hard things on a regular basis, that doesn't sound very enjoyable. But like what I've seen is that when I'm the happiest is when I'm operating in a pretty optimized capacity, right? Where I am intentionally, making myself uncomfortable and I'm growing and I'm working on things, not, settling, which, I think that's where you can kind of end up in a rut. And for most people, at least if they're there too long, it's not fulfilling. It's not a recipe for a happy life. But I think that's counterintuitive for a lot of people.
Yeah, again, I think a lot of it just comes down to that confidence. I think most people know that they shouldn't eat McDonald's and they shouldn't drink and they shouldn't be sedentary. But I think most people just don't have the confidence in thinking like, oh, I could never run a marathon. I could never stop drinking, because they don't believe in themselves, because maybe somebody has never believed in them, or for whatever reason, they don't have that confidence in themselves. And so I think, again, that is where, by forcing yourself to do that thing every single day, you're just slowly build this confidence and teach yourself, maybe even at just like a more subconscious level of like, oh, I can go and do these very difficult things. I can quit my job and go start a business. I can go run a marathon. I can, do these things that I always want to do that I know are going to make me better. I think, again, a lot of it just comes down to having that self-confidence.
Yeah. You have a quote on your website that I wanted to point out. It says, if a thing is humanly possible, consider it within your reach. It's a Marcus Aurelius quote. I love that. And I think it ties in perfectly. Have you read much Stoic philosophy?
Yeah, I've read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I've read a lot of like Plato and Socrates and those kind of things. But again, like that quote is on there specifically because of, people like Cam Haynes or David Goggins. I not that like, I mean, I think those guys are so far ahead of me. That's why I idolize them. But like, I feel like their stories are just similar to mine and to tons of other people's, because they're just like average dudes. They're just average people who, they don't have this crazy talent. They're not like super smart, whatever it might be. Like, they're just they're average. And so that's why that quote is on there again, because it's like, if somebody else has done it, that means that you can do it as well. It's just a matter of, you putting in the time and work that's required for you to get there. And again, to bring up confidence, I think that's one of the biggest things is like, if these people can do it, if this average person can go and do this big thing, then why can't I?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I was trying to get this across to my 6-year-old daughter the other day. She's doing competitive dance, and she's the youngest one, on the competition team. And, so she's in there and she sees these older girls that are, far more advanced. They're bigger, their bodies are more developed, they're more coordinated, they've been dancing longer. And she sees them and she'll make comments from time to time where it's like she doesn't think she can ever get there. All right. And I'm like, look, did you watch them do it? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, then that means you can do that too. Now, it might not be tomorrow. You got to be willing to put the work in. It's not going to happen automatically, but if they're doing it, there's no reason that you can't do it if you're willing to put the work in, to learn. So I think it's a valuable lesson that we all need to keep reminding ourselves of. Like I said, I could nerd out on this stuff with you for the next 3 hours, but I know you're a busy guy and have a lot going on. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you, connect with you if they're interested in any of the training or consulting services that you provide? Where can they connect?
Yeah, probably the best place is just my website. It's jeremymiller.io. And then my Instagram, probably the next best place is just Jeremy Miller. So yeah, it's probably those two options would be best.
We'll put it in the show notes. We'll make it easy for people to find. And Jeremy, man, really, really appreciate you making time to do this. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and getting to know you a little bit. I know you've inspired me. So keep doing what you're doing.
Awesome. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for dropping in.